I drove 12 years to a party in honor of my brother's marriage, and when I arrived, he just said, "Oh, we already celebrated last night, just for the immediate family." I just laughed and went on my way. 5 days later, he called me in the phone. "The card is not working," and I said, "Oh, I forgot." The road to Boston was a real challenge, 12 hours behind the wheel, and that was after a full day of work on Friday. But I was ready to do it for Max. My younger brother had finally found his happiness and was going to get married. It was worth any effort. The last time we saw each other was almost a year ago on Thanksgiving. He came to me in Pittsburgh without Veronica, saying that she had some family obligations. That was the first time he mentioned that he was thinking about getting engaged. Last week I received his message. "Ella, we're having an engagement dinner on Saturday. Nothing special, just family and close friends. Come if you can." Of course I did. I took an extra day off on Monday, even though my bosses were not happy about it. We were just closing the quarterly report. But I couldn't miss such an event. All the way there, I was thinking about the path my brother had taken. From a difficult teenager to a successful financial consultant with a prestigious degree. I was proud of him. And, to be honest, I was a little proud of myself. After all, it was I who helped him get back on his feet. The GPS brought me to a beautiful 3-story house in a prestigious neighborhood in Boston. "Not bad, Max, not bad," I thought as I parked. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. 12 hours of traveling hadn't spared my hair, but overall it was decent. I pulled out a box of crystal glasses, costing about half of my monthly rent, and a bottle of Widow Clicquot champagne, another quarter of my rent, from the trunk. It was a little over my usual budget, but wasn't my brother's engagement a special occasion? With a fluttering heart, I pressed the doorbell. I expected to be greeted with warm hugs, the noise of celebration, and laughter. The door opened, and Max stood on the threshold, wearing pants and a t-shirt, with the logo of his favorite football team. No holiday suit, no smile. "Ella?" He looked surprised, almost worried. My heart skipped a beat, but I chalked it up to travel fatigue. "Hi, brother. I'm here for your engagement dinner." I tried to hug him with one arm, while holding the gifts in the other. He hugged me tensely in return and stepped back. "Ella, the dinner was yesterday. We decided to postpone it because Veronica's parents could only come on Friday." I stood there, still smiling, but I could feel the smile gradually stiffening on my face. "But you wrote me about Saturday." He rubbed the back of his head. "I must have forgotten to tell you about the change." "I'm sorry, sis. You know, it's just so much trouble with all this." A woman's voice came from the back of the house. "Max, who is it?" "It's Ella," he answered, not very loudly. Veronica came to the door, tall, slender, with perfect hair and manicure. Even at home, she looked like something out of a fashion magazine. We had met only once, at a Christmas party at a mutual friend's house. She'd been polite but cool then. "Oh, Ella, what a surprise." Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were assessing my appearance. A rumpled blouse, a tired face, inexpensive but good quality shoes. "I'm here for the engagement dinner." I tried to keep my voice steady. "I didn't know the date had been changed." "Oh, that's a shame. We had a wonderful evening last night." She tilted her head slightly. "Just the inner circle. Max's parents, my parents, a few close friends. Very intimate." Her words hit me right in the heart. The inner circle, which I was obviously not a part of. I turned my gaze to Max, who suddenly found a very interesting spot on the floor. "Here, this is for you." I held out the champagne and a box of glasses. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you, very nice." Veronica took the gifts, as if I had brought her a bouquet of wildflowers instead of orchids. We were just about to update the dishes. There was an awkward pause. I was waiting for Max to invite me inside, to offer me at least a cup of coffee after the long drive. "Well, I won't bother you," I finally said, keeping my dignity intact. "I think I'll go to the hotel, rest from the road." "Do you have a place to stay?" Max asked, and for a moment I had hope. "Not yet. I thought maybe." Oh, there's a great hotel downtown called Park Plaza, Veronica quickly interjected. I see. Thanks for the advice, I nodded. And congratulations again. It was nice to see you. Yeah, you too. Veronica was halfway through closing the door. Take care, Ella. The door closed, and I was left alone on the porch, feeling a lump growing in my throat. I couldn't cry. Not here. I straightened my back proudly and walked to the car. It was only when I started the engine and drove off their street that the tears started to flow down my cheeks. 12 hours behind the wheel. A gift for half my salary, and they didn't even invite me for coffee. Only the inner circle. When did I stop being the inner circle for my only brother? I pulled over to the side of the road, pulled out my phone, and booked a hotel room. Not the fancy one Veronica had suggested, but a more modest one for half the price. Then I just sat there, staring at nothing. For some reason, I remembered our last serious conversation with Max, when he told me about his desire to propose to Veronica. Then he mentioned a diamond ring in passing. Well, it was worth the price. Veronica deserves the best, he said, avoiding my gaze. How much? I asked him bluntly. 7,000, he admitted reluctantly. I whistled. And where will you get that kind of money? If I sell some shares, but this is not the best time to sell. And I understood. He wanted money again, and I gave it to him again. $5,000, almost all my savings. This is the last time, Max, I promised myself then. It was not the first or the 10th time I rescued him financially. First it was student loans, then investment in a startup, then a car payment, then temporary difficulties. As I drove to the hotel, other memories flashed through my mind. How I turned down a scholarship in New York to stay with him in Pittsburgh after my mom died. How I worked 2 jobs to pay for his education at a prestigious university. How she lent him money that he rarely paid back. And never once, not once, did I hear sincere gratitude. Everything was taken for granted. And now, I was not even part of the inner circle. At the hotel, I stood in the shower for a long time, trying to wash away the fatigue and humiliation. Then I just fell on the bed, too exhausted to even cry. The next morning, I had breakfast at a cafe near the hotel and drove back to Pittsburgh. There was no point in staying. I didn't write anything to Max, I just disappeared. 5 days later, when I was already immersed in work, as if nothing had happened, I received a call from him. I stared at the screen for a long time, hesitating, but I answered it. Ella? Hi, it's me. His voice sounded tense. Listen, I have a problem. My card is not working, and I urgently need to pay for a photographer for my wedding. Could you send me some money? I'll pay you back next week, I promise. I thought about the 12-hour drive, about the door that slammed in my face. Oh, Max, I forgot, I replied calmly. I have problems with the bank, too. I can't help you. After that conversation about the card, I couldn't sleep all night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, remembering everything that had happened between Max and me over the past 25 years. When exactly did everything go wrong? When did my little brother, whom I loved so much, turn into a man who was ashamed of me? Our problems started long before Veronica. Probably back on the day my dad packed his things in 2 big suitcases. I was 12, Max was 10. I remember sitting on the stairs and watching him rush between the bedroom and the hallway without looking up at us. Dad, are you coming back? Max asked in a small voice when his father was already standing on the doorstep. Of course, champ, he replied, ruffling his son's hair. My mom and I just need a little break from each other, but I knew it was a lie even then. I overheard them arguing yesterday. I can't live in this hole anymore. Who's holding you back, Richard? She understands me like no one else. Then go to your understanding lover. That night, Max cried until the morning. I sat next to him, stroking his head and assuring him that everything would be fine. And in the morning, my mother, with red eyes and shaking hands, told me that she would now be working 2 jobs so that we could have something to live on. Ella, you're a big girl now, she said, smiling tightly. You'll take care of Max, right? And I was. I cooked dinner, checked his homework, consoled him when he was teased at school because he was the only one in the class with divorced parents. Dad visited us less and less, and then stopped altogether when he had a daughter with his new wife a year later. They don't want us anymore, Ella? Max asked as we ate dinner alone again, reheating yesterday's pizza. No, what are you talking about? I hugged him. It's just that adults sometimes get confused about their feelings. But I'll always be there for you, I promise. In high school, I worked in a cafe alongside my studies to have some pocket money for myself and Max. I bought him fashionable clothes that his mom couldn't afford, new video games that all his friends had. He was very impressionable, constantly comparing himself to others. Look, Jason has new Nike sneakers. He would grumble when we came home from school. And I have these terrible supermarket shoes. Sneakers don't make a person, Max, I would answer, even though I understood how important it was for a teenager. But the next week I gave him half my salary so he could buy those damn sneakers. When it came time to go to college, I got a scholarship to Columbia University. A full scholarship that I had dreamed of all my life. It was in New York. Can you imagine? I enthusiastically told Max, who was in his senior year of high school at the time. His reaction puzzled me. He was looking down at his phone, not even looking up. So you're going? He asked quietly. Well, yes. It's the chance of a lifetime. What about me and Mom? His voice trembled. You're just going to leave us here? And then I saw the same frightened look of a 10-year-old boy watching his father leave the house. My mom worked 12 hours a day, often not spending the night at home. In fact, I was both mother and father to Max. A week later, I called the Columbia University admissions office and told them that I could not accept their offer. Instead, I enrolled at a local university in Pittsburgh to stay close to my brother. You didn't have to do that, my mom said when she learned of my decision. Her eyes were a mixture of relief and guilt. It's okay, Mom. Pittsburgh is a good university, too. I tried to sound convincing, although inside, I felt my dream crumbling. Max didn't even seem to notice my sacrifice. He just took it for granted that I would stay. When Max turned 18, he received a letter of acceptance to the prestigious Boston University. I can't do it, he sighed, showing the letter to his mother. We can't afford the fees. My mother looked devastated. Her health was already compromised by years of hard work. We'll figure something out, I said, though I didn't know how. I took on extra work on weekends, took out a loan, and dug into my meager savings. Max left for Boston, and my mom and I stayed in Pittsburgh, working to pay for his education. 3 years later, my mom fell ill. She had pancreatic cancer, stage 4. She died so quickly that Max and I barely had time to say goodbye. At the funeral, he cried on my shoulder like a little boy. You're the only one I have left, Ella, he sobbed. Everything will be fine. I stroked his back, just like 20 years ago on the stairs. We'll make it. Dad came to the funeral, but he kept to himself. He gave us both an awkward hug, mumbled something about being always there if you need anything, and drove away quickly. Hypocrite, Max said, watching his expensive car drive away. I was 25, Max was 23. He was just graduating from university, and I continued to support him financially, even though I was barely making ends meet myself. But I believed that it was temporary. He would get his degree, find a good job, and everything would be fine. He got his degree, and even a good job at a consulting firm. But our relationship began to change. Max called less and less often and didn't answer my messages. When I invited him for the holidays, he always had some excuse. Sorry, sis, but I'm swamped at work, he would say. There was no next time. And then he met Veronica. The first time he mentioned her was in passing, in a phone conversation. By the way, I met a girl. It seems to be serious. That's great, I was excited. Tell me about her. Well, she's from a good family. Her father is a famous surgeon. Her mother is a professor at the university. She has an excellent education and works in the field of art. I felt slightly uncomfortable with this description. It was as if he was listing lines from a resume, not talking about a loved one. We met only a year later at a Christmas party organized by his colleague. I came at the invitation of Max, who seemed strangely tense. "Listen, Ella," he said, meeting me at the entrance. "There will be important people there. Partners of the firm, clients. Veronica. I'm looking forward to meeting her," I smiled, not understanding why he was so nervous. "Yeah, just—" He lowered his voice. "Don't mention the cafe you worked at in college, okay? And the fact that I paid for my own education. Everyone here comes from very wealthy families, you know?" That was the first time I realized that he was ashamed of me and his background. "Of course, Max, I understand." I understand. Veronica was exactly as I had imagined, impeccably dressed, with perfect manners and a cold gaze. She looked at my dress, the best I had ever owned, and smiled slightly. "Ella, Max has told me so much about you. I was sure it wasn't true. Judging by the way he was tensing up next to me, he was reluctant to tell me much." "Nice to meet you too," I replied. "Max tells me you work in the art world." "Yes, I run a small gallery in downtown Boston. More for the soul than the money, you know." All evening she talked about exhibitions, charity auctions, and trips to Europe that she and Max were planning. And he was looking at her with such adoration that I was embarrassed. I'd never seen him so passionate. After that party, my contacts with Max became even less frequent. He only called when he needed something, usually money. "Ella, I'm in a bit of a pinch." He always started the same way. "Could you borrow a few hundred until payday?" I always borrowed, and I rarely got the money back. Once he asked for $5,000 for an investment project. It was almost all my savings, but I agreed. A month later, I learned from a mutual friend that Max and Veronica had gone on vacation to the Maldives. "You didn't know?" She was surprised. "They posted so many photos on Instagram." Veronica boasted that Max had given her this trip for their anniversary. I went to Veronica's Instagram, even though I hadn't followed her page before. There really were a lot of photos from their vacation: an expensive hotel, a private bungalow over the water, and not a single mention of where the money for this luxury came from. That evening, I didn't answer Max's call for the first time. He left a voicemail. "Hey, sis. Listen, Veronica and I are planning an incredible party for my promotion. Could you help out a little bit financially? I'll pay you back, I promise." I deleted the message without calling him back. But a week later, he came to see me in Pittsburgh for the first time in almost 2 years. "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you answering your phone?" He looked genuinely concerned. "I saw photos from the Maldives," I said quietly. $5,000 for an investment project, right?" He was embarrassed, but only for a moment. "Ella, it was wrong. I admit it. But you don't understand. Veronica is used to a certain standard of living. Her parents are wealthy, and I can't put my face in the dirt. Sigh. So lying to your sister and taking her last savings is okay, but being honest with a girl about your financial situation is not? You don't understand." He suddenly raised his voice. "She makes me feel like someone. She has opened the door to a world I could never have dreamed of. Her parents accept me as their son. I finally have a real family." His words hit me like a slap in the face. "What am I, Max? Am I not family?" He looked at me almost pitifully. "You are my past, Ella. A past I don't want to remember. A childhood in a cramped apartment. A mother who was never home. A father who abandoned us. I gave you everything." My voice trembled. "My life, my education, my money. And I'm grateful, I really am." He sighed. "But you have to understand, I can't explain to Veronica and her family that my sister is a middle manager in a logistics company. They're all from a different circle." "And you're from their circle now?" I sneered bitterly. He stood up abruptly. "I knew you wouldn't understand. You've always been jealous of my success." "Success?" I couldn't help but laugh. You're a liar who's ashamed of his family and begs for money from his sister to impress a rich girl." He left, slamming the door. And 2 days later, he sent a message. "I'm sorry for the fight. You are right. I shouldn't have hidden the truth about the Maldives. I promise it won't happen again." I believed him. Again. And when a month later, he asked for money for a new suit for an important meeting with clients, I sent him the money again. Because he was my brother. The only family I had left. I didn't expect Max to react so strongly to my rejection. Only 2 days had passed when he showed up at my office unannounced. I was in the middle of a meeting with my team about a new logistics project. Ella, Janet, the secretary, opened the door gently. "You have a visitor. He says he's your brother, and it's urgent." I could feel my fingertips getting cold. After apologizing to my colleagues, I went out into the hallway, where Max stood with his shirt open and his eyes red. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly, trying to get him away from the conference room. "A meeting?" He raised his voice. "My life is falling apart and you're having a meeting." "Max, let's talk in my office." I took his elbow, but he pulled my hand away. "Do you know what happened after you forgot to help me?" He almost shouted. "We lost the booking for the photographer, the best in Boston. You're a selfish bitch. You always have been," he continued, ignoring the surprised looks of his colleagues. "You pretend to be a sacrificial sister, but you're really just jealous of my happiness," a calm voice behind me said. David Parker, my colleague from the analytics department, was standing there with documents in his hands, watching the scene. "Who the hell are you?" Max exclaimed. "David Parker, Ella's colleague," he replied. "And now you're creating a very unpleasant scene in a professional environment." Thanks to David's intervention, Max and I moved to my office. He immediately began to complain about the financial difficulties with the wedding, but the conversation was interrupted by a call from Veronica. "Ella, it's Veronica." Her voice was icy. "Because of your childish revenge, we lost the best photographer in town." "You just wanted to enjoy our problems," she continued. "You know, Max always said you were too attached to him, almost unhealthily so." This phrase struck me in the heart. I looked at Max, who looked down. As soon as I disconnected the call, the phone rang again. The display read, "Dad." My dad and I hadn't talked much since my mom died. The last time we saw each other was at her funeral 10 years ago. "Ella," he sounded concerned. "What's going on?" "I just talked to Max and Veronica." "Max needs your help, and you're refusing. It's not like you," he continued. "How do you know what it is like?" I couldn't help myself. "You haven't been around for the last 25 years. They owe $15,000 for the wedding hall," my father said. I hung up without saying goodbye. $15,000! And they were counting on me without even asking. "You promised me that after the ring there would be no more big requests." I turned to Max. "Veronica and I wanted a special day," he shrugged. "And when you agreed to $5,000 for the ring so easily, we thought that I would just give you $15,000 for the wedding, without any discussion." Max suggested that we meet the next day and discuss everything calmly. I agreed, even though I suspected manipulation. After he left, David came back into the office. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Your conversation sounded tense." "Just family stuff," I tried to smile. "You know, maybe it's none of my business, but what I heard sounded very toxic," David began cautiously. "I grew up with a twin sister. We fought, but we never manipulated guilt." "It wasn't healthy sibling conflict," he continued. "It was emotional abuse." His words made me think. The next day, I arrived at the cafe right on time. Max and Veronica were already waiting for me. "We would like to discuss everything peacefully," Max began. "Let's start with how you owe $15,000 for the wedding hall," I suggested. Veronica explained that they had chosen the Riverside Palace, the best wedding venue in Boston, and now they needed to pay by the end of the week. "You decided this without me? Without even asking me if I could or would?" I didn't hide my surprise. "You're my sister." Max tried to take my hand. "You've always helped me. We thought you'd be happy to be a part of your brother's big day," Veronica added. "It was a misunderstanding." Max ran his hand through his hair. "We didn't think you could come all the way from Pittsburgh for one night." "But I did," I said quietly. "And you didn't even invite me for coffee." "We've already discussed this." Veronica waved me off. "You can't use one mistake as an excuse." "How about 10,000? Or at least 5 to keep the reservation?" Max suggested. "Max," I began slowly, "how many times have you borrowed money from me in recent years?" "I didn't count." He shrugged. 27, I answered. 27 times in the last 5 years. That's a total of $32,000. "But I'm your brother." He raised his voice. "Isn't family supposed to help?" "Help, yes. Being an ATM, no." I shook my head. "I gave you everything. I gave up my scholarship in Columbia, worked 2 jobs to pay for your education. And how have you repaid me? You're ashamed of me. You don't invite me to celebrations. You talk about me behind my back. And you used the 5,000 I gave you for the ring to go to the Maldives, right?" I looked him straight in the eye. "I saw the photos on Veronica's Instagram," I explained. "You asked for money for an investment project. And a month later, you were vacationing in a bungalow over the water." "It was an investment," Veronica said quickly. "Enough!" Max slammed his fist on the table. "You've always been jealous of me." "Because I was able to escape from our miserable past, and you were stuck in it." "But you're lonely," Veronica interjected. "Without a family, without a loved one. That's why you cling to Max. He's all you have." Her words hurt, but I didn't show it. "I may be alone, but at least I'm honest. You guys pretend to be rich, spend money you don't have, and expect someone else to pay." "We have to go," Veronica said suddenly, standing up. "She'll never understand." "Wait!" Max tried to stop her. "Ella, please, we really need your help. We're desperate." I looked at my little brother, whom I used to love so much, who, to be honest, I still love. But now I saw him clearly, without illusions. "Find a cheaper hall," I said calmly. "Give up the luxuries. Ask Veronica's parents for money, if they are so wealthy. But not another cent from me." And I stood up, leaving them sitting at the table. When I returned home after meeting Max and Veronica, I felt devastated. As if someone had taken out my soul and left only an empty shell. I mechanically took a shower, ordered takeout, even though I wasn't hungry. I sat in the silence of my apartment, looking at the dark windows of the house across the street. For the next week, I felt like I was moving in a fog. I came to work, completed tasks, answered questions from my colleagues, but everything was like a glass. My brain kept replaying our conversation in the cafe, their words, my answers. Was I being too harsh? Shouldn't I have helped him after all? After all, he is my only brother. And then I remembered his words. "You selfish bitch. You've always been jealous of me. You don't understand anything." And something inside me hardened, turned into determination. On Thursday, I got a call from the head of HR, Sarah Myers. "Ella, have you thought about the offer in Chicago? They need an answer by the end of the week. 3 weeks ago, I was offered a promotion to head the logistics department in our Chicago office. More salary, more responsibility. I turned it down, saying I wasn't ready to move. In fact, I was thinking about Max, how he would be without me, in case he needed my help." "Is the offer still valid?" I asked, suddenly feeling my pulse speed up. "Yes, of course," Sarah answered in surprise. "They are very interested in you. Then I accept." "Really?" She did not hide her surprise. "What has changed?" "Everything," I answered sincerely. "Absolutely everything." I hung up the phone, feeling strangely relieved. It was as if the great burden I had been carrying for years had suddenly disappeared. Chicago. A new city, a new job, a new life. Without Max and his problems. In the evening, my phone rang again. It was my father. I stared at the screen for a long time, hesitating, but finally answered. Dash. Hello. Ella, it's me. His voice sounded tired. I just talked to Max. He told me you two had a fight. It's not a fight, I replied calmly. I've finally seen our relationship for what it is. He's your brother, my father sighed. Family is the most important thing. Really? I couldn't help but smile bitterly. I don't remember you adhering to that principle yourself when you left us. There was silence. I deserved it, he finally said. I was a bad father. But don't make my mistakes. Don't break the family ties. I'm not breaking them, I replied. I'm just not being an ATM machine and a sacrificial lamb anymore. And you know what? I'm moving to Chicago. I've been offered a promotion. That's great. His voice softened. Congratulations. You've always been a smart girl. Thank you. I suddenly felt grateful for his words. And about Max's wedding. They'll find a way. I'll talk to him, my father promised. And maybe we can have lunch together sometime? We can talk. Not about Max, but about you. I really want to know how you are. I was silent, thinking, maybe, but not right now. I need time. I understand, he said softly. The next day, as I was gathering documents for a meeting, David walked into my office. I heard you're going to Chicago, he said, leaning on the door jamb. Yes, I nodded. It's time for a change. Is it because of your brother? He asked directly, but delicately. I put down the papers and looked at him. Partly, but mostly because of me. I've been putting his needs before mine for too long. It's time to start living my own life. He smiled. It's the right thing to do, Ella. And I'm happy for you. Although, to be honest, I'm going to miss you. You're the best coworker I've ever worked with. Something in his eyes made me blush. Thank you. I'll miss you too, I answered honestly. You know, he suddenly straightened up. I've been invited to a project in Chicago as well, a technical audit of their logistics system. I'll be there for the first 3 weeks after you move in. Would you like to show the city to a newcomer? His words sounded casual, but I noticed a slight excitement in his voice. I'd love to, I replied, feeling my lips stretch into a smile. The next 2 weeks flew by in the chaos of moving preparations. I rented an apartment, packed my things, said goodbye to my colleagues. Max never called or wrote again. There was no news from him. Chicago greeted me with cold wind and rain, but I felt strangely elated. My new apartment was smaller than the previous one, but it had a great view of Lake Michigan. The new office was modern and spacious, and my coworkers were friendly and professional. David arrived a week after me. We met at a cafe near my new home. How are the first days at the new place? He asked, stirring his coffee. Busy, but interesting, I replied. Lots of new faces, lots of information, but I like it. And what about your personal life? He looked at me cautiously. I shook my head. No. And you know, I feel even lighter than I expected. It's as if I've thrown off a heavy backpack that I've been carrying for years. That's normal, he nodded. But I can see that you're still not comfortable. I looked at him in surprise. How can you tell? I can see it on your face, he smiled. You bite your lip when you're worried and keep checking your phone as if you're waiting for a call. Observant, I said. Yeah, it's hard for me sometimes. Max and I have always been close, no matter what. Have you ever thought about therapy? David asked cautiously. You know, to deal with this rescuer complex? Rescuer complex? I almost laughed. Is that a diagnosis? Actually, yes, he nodded. My twin sister is a psychotherapist, and she talks about it a lot. People who constantly sacrifice themselves for the sake of others put other people's needs above their own. This often develops in childhood due to family circumstances. I thought about it, remembering how I had taken responsibility for my 10-year-old brother when I was 12. Maybe you're right, I finally said. but I don't know where to start. I can recommend a good therapist, he offered. A week later, I was sitting in Dr. Olivia Raymond's cozy office, telling my life story about a father who left, a mother who worked herself to death, a brother who I actually raised, about Columbia University, which I turned down, about how I had sacrificed my own needs for Max's sake time and time again. You know, Ella, Doctor, Raymond said after our third meeting, what you're describing is a classic model of codependency. You have taken on the role of savior, and this role has become part of your identity. So what do I do now? I asked. You need to start setting healthy boundaries, she smiled. And most importantly, you need to learn to put your needs on an equal footing with the needs of others. Not higher, but not lower. Gradually, with each session, I began to understand myself better. Why I was so easily giving in to my interests. Why it was so hard for me to say no. Why I felt guilty when I thought about my own desires. Meanwhile, David and I were working on a big project to optimize the logistics system for a supermarket chain. The hours we spent together discussing strategies and analyzing data brought us closer together. I began to notice how my heart would race when he walked into the room, how it would make me feel good to hear him laugh, to see him smile. You know you smile when you talk about him, Dr. Raymond said during one of our sessions. Really? I was surprised. Absolutely, she nodded. And that's great. Just don't forget about those boundaries we talked about. Even in a healthy relationship, it's important to maintain your own identity. I started to socialize more with my colleagues. I went to lunches, joined Friday get-togethers after work. Before, I was always focused on work and rarely allowed myself such luxuries. I was always in a hurry to get home, always in touch, in case Max needed something. Now, I was learning to live for myself. I signed up for photography courses, which I had long dreamed of. I started running in the mornings along the lake. I even got a cat from the shelter, a red-headed and annoying cat I named Fitz. I started dating David officially 2 months after I moved here. Everything developed gradually and organically. He didn't push, demand, or manipulate. I felt safe with him, and it was a new, unusual feeling. Do you know what I like most about you? He asked me one evening when we were having dinner on my balcony. Your ability to change. What do you mean? I was surprised. You completely rebuilt your life in 3 months, he explained. You changed cities, jobs, started therapy, made new friends. Many people talk about change, but few actually change. His words warmed me from the inside. I have really worked hard on myself in recent months, and it seems to be working. On the 3rd month after the move, when I started to feel really happy, I received a message from Veronica on my phone. Ella, I know we're not on the best of terms, but I need your help. The wedding has been postponed. Max has a problem with alcohol. He won't listen to anyone but you. Please come over. I looked at this message for a long time, feeling old patterns of behavior trying to take over. My first instinct was to drop everything and go to save my brother. But then I remembered Dr. Raymond's words about healthy boundaries. Instead of answering right away, I called my therapist. Dr. Raymond, I need your advice, I said when she answered. My brother has a drinking problem, and his fiancée is asking me to come over. How do you feel about this? She asked. Part of me wants to rush to the rescue, as I always do. But the other part of me knows that it will drag me back into a toxic relationship. You realize that you can't control your brother's behavior, right? Dr. Raymond asked gently. And that his drinking problem is his responsibility, not yours? I understand, I replied after a pause. But don't I have to help him? Help, yes, but not to save him. There is a difference between support and rescue. Support allows another person to solve their problems. Rescue does it for them. I thought about her words and then wrote a response to Veronica. I'm sorry to hear about Max's problems, but I can't come over. Instead, I recommend that you contact a professional addiction counselor. Here are the contacts of a good clinic in Boston. They can really help if Max wants it. She added information about a rehabilitation center she had found on the internet. Veronica replied almost instantly, "I can't believe you are so selfish. Your brother is suffering and you don't even want to come." I took a deep breath, feeling a wave of guilt rolling in. But then I remembered all of our sessions with Dr. Raymond, all the work I had done on myself. I can't take responsibility for his choice, but I sincerely hope he gets the help he needs. This time, there was no response. In the evening, I told David about everything while we were walking along the lake. "How do you feel?" he asked, taking my hand. "It's weird," I admitted. "Part of me still feels guilty, but the other part of me knows that I did the right thing." "That's okay." He squeezed my hand. "Change is never easy, especially when it comes to such a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior." I'll say, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm living for myself and not for someone else," I said, looking at the sunset over the lake. "And it's scary, but at the same time, it's the best feeling in the world." "You deserve it," he replied simply. "You deserve to be happy, Ella." And in that moment, standing next to a man who saw me for who I was, without any expectations or demands, I really believed it. A year has passed since I moved to Chicago. In that time, my life has changed beyond recognition. Instead of a cramped apartment in Pittsburgh, I have a cozy place overlooking Lake Michigan. Instead of being a middle manager, I was in charge of an entire logistics department. And most importantly, instead of a toxic relationship with her brother and a constant sense of guilt, she has a healthy, supportive relationship with David and freedom from the past. Although, of course, the past never lets go completely. It became a part of me, shaped my personality. But now, thanks to therapy with Dr. Raymond, I've learned to see it as a valuable experience, not a burden. It was hard at first. Every time the phone rang at an unusual time, I thought it was Max with another crisis. I reflexively tensed up, ready to drop everything and rush to help. But the call usually turned out to be from a colleague or David, and each time it got easier. We hadn't talked to Max since Veronica's message. I knew from my father that my brother had agreed to go to rehab after all. "He is seriously working on himself," my dad said during our rare phone conversation. I nodded, not knowing what to say. I wanted to believe, but I had seen too many broken promises in the past. Now, a few days before my birthday, as the autumn sun lit up Chicago's skyscrapers, I received an unexpected email. University of Pittsburgh reunion. 10 years later. I hesitated. On the one hand, it would be interesting to see old friends. On the other hand, Max could also be there. "Maybe we should go," David suggested cautiously when I told him about the invitation. "It's a chance to close some doors from the past." David, he became not just a partner, but a true friend. Our relationship developed gradually and naturally, without drama or manipulation. He never tried to change me or use me. The first time I burst into tears in front of him, remembering my mother and everything we had to go through, he just hugged me and said, "You are the strongest person I know." After a week of thinking about it, I decided to go to the meeting, especially since it was on the weekend, and I had been planning to visit Pittsburgh for a long time to pick up the rest of my things from my old apartment that I was renting. "Do you mind coming with me?" I asked David. "Of course," he smiled. "I want to see the city where you grew up. And meet your friends." We arrived in Pittsburgh on Friday night. The city greeted us with coolness and light rain, so familiar after windy Chicago. We stayed in a hotel in the center, not far from the university. On Saturday evening, wearing the navy blue dress I had bought especially for this event, I felt a strange excitement. "You look stunning," David said as he tied his tie. "Thank you," I smiled, feeling grateful for his presence. The meeting room was decorated in the university's colors. Familiar faces that had changed a little in 10 years. Joyful shouts, hugs. I talked to my former classmates, introduced them to David, and laughed at the memories of my student years. And then I saw him. Max was standing by the window, talking to the former president of the student fraternity. He had changed. He had lost weight, grew a beard, but most of all, his eyes had changed. Calm, focused, without the same fussiness. Our eyes met across the room. He froze for a moment, then apologized to the person he was talking to and walked toward me. Ella! He stopped a few steps away, as if afraid to come closer. I didn't know you'd be here. I didn't know you were coming either, I answered honestly. Better, he nodded, and I noticed that he was nervously rubbing the bracelet on his wrist, a badge of sobriety worn by participants in the AA program. There was an awkward pause. David, who had been standing next to me, gently moved away, leaving us alone. Do you want to go out on the terrace? Max suggested. It's too noisy to talk here. I nodded, and we walked out onto the spacious terrace overlooking the university park. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a freshness in the air and drops on the railing. I'm sorry, Ella, Max suddenly said, looking not at me, but off into the distance, for the way I treated you, for all the money you gave me and I never paid back, for being ashamed of you in front of Veronica and her friends, for not appreciating your sacrifices. I was silent, not knowing what to say. I had imagined this conversation many times during the year I had been working with my therapist, but the reality was completely different. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued, finally looking me in the eye. I just want you to know that I realize what a terrible person I was, and I'm working on changing. What happened? I asked, really interested. He took a deep breath, as if to collect his thoughts. After you refused to come, I got so drunk that I ended up in the hospital. Veronica was scared and called an ambulance. The doctor said that a little longer, and it might have been too late. I shuddered as I imagined that scene. Dad came to the hospital, Max continued, and you know what he said to me? You're becoming like me. You use the people who love you, and then you leave them. That hit me. He rubbed the bracelet on his wrist. I went through rehabilitation, 90 days, the hardest days of my life. But there I realized that the problem was not alcohol. It was just a symptom. The problem was in me, in my selfishness, in my constant desire for more, in my inability to appreciate what I have. What about the wedding? I asked cautiously. And Veronica? The wedding was canceled. He smiled bitterly. It turned out that she didn't want me, but rather the image of a successful financial advisor with rich friends. I didn't feel gloating, although I might have felt it before. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Don't be, he shook his head. It was a necessary lesson. Now I work in a small financial company. The salary is lower, but I like it. And I volunteer with teenagers from troubled families. I help them with financial literacy and college prep. That's great, Max. I was genuinely impressed. I still have a lot of work to do, he sighed. I still fight the urge to drink when things get tough. I still sometimes envy people who can afford things I can't, but I'm trying to be better. For myself. Not for my father, not for Veronica, not to create some kind of image, just for me. I nodded, understanding him more than ever. I'm happy for you, Max. I really am. And how are you? He looked at me with sincere interest. I heard from my dad that you moved to Chicago, got a promotion. Yes, I smiled. I'm in charge of the logistics department. The work is interesting, though difficult. And that guy you came in with? David, I nodded. We've been together for almost a year. He's good, Max. He respects my boundaries, appreciates me for who I am. I'm glad, he smiled. And it was a sincere smile. We talked some more, about work, about Chicago, about his volunteering. The conversation was cautious. We avoided sharp corners. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to my brother, not someone who wanted something from me. Ella, he suddenly became serious. I'd like to restore our relationship. Not at once, of course, in small steps. I realize I've lost your trust, and I don't expect things to be the same as before. But maybe we could call each other sometimes? Or exchange messages? I looked at him, this new Max, who seemed more mature and responsible. Part of me was still afraid that this was just another act, another manipulation. But the other part of me, the part that had been in therapy for a year and had learned to trust my intuition, felt that he had really changed. Let's try it, I finally said, without expectations on either side. He nodded, apparently relieved. Sorry to interrupt, he smiled, but they announced dinner. We're done, I smiled back. David, this is my brother Max. They shook hands and exchanged a few polite words. Then we all returned to the hall together. The rest of the evening was spent in a pleasant atmosphere of reminiscing and laughter. I introduced David to my university friends, danced to songs that were popular 10 years ago, and from time to time I caught Max's eye across the room. He kept to himself, didn't drink alcohol, and left early, saying he had a support group meeting in the morning. Walking back to the hotel, I felt strangely relieved. It was as if a heavy stone I had been carrying around for years had finally begun to shrink. What did you talk about? David asked me cautiously as we walked through the night streets of Pittsburgh. About the past. About how we've both changed over the past year. I took his hand. He really has changed. Or maybe he started to return to the Max he used to be, before all our family problems. And you made up? Not really, I shook my head. That would be too easy, but we took the first step, and I think that over time, maybe we can build a new, healthier relationship. David squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, you know? I'm not sure I've forgiven him yet, I answered honestly, but I'm willing to try. Not for his sake, but for my own. So that I don't have to carry this burden anymore. Last year, I finally realized that true support is not about sacrificing yourself for the sake of another. It is not dissolving in other people's problems, not giving up your own needs. True support is about setting healthy boundaries, respect for yourself and for the other, and understanding that everyone is responsible for their actions. I realized that I cannot control Max's life. I cannot force him to make the right choices. I can only control my attitude to the situation, my reactions, my choices. That evening, standing on the balcony of my hotel room and looking at the lights of Pittsburgh at night, I felt a strange, calm happiness. Not euphoria, not stormy joy, but the deep, quiet peace of a person who has finally found his place in the world. David was sleeping next to me, a man who loved me not for what I did for him, but for who I was. Chicago was waiting ahead with new challenges and opportunities, and somewhere there, in his life, was Max, who was also trying to find his way. And for the first time in many years, I didn't feel the burden of responsibility for him. I was free, free to be myself, free to live my life, free to build my happiness. And this freedom was the most valuable gift I had ever given myself.
Любі глядачі, дякую вам за перегляд, ставте лайки та підписуйтесь на канал. Також напишіть в коментарях, чи погоджуєтесь ви з Дженніфер, чи вона мала розказати все матері, чи ні, чи мала все розказати своєму коханцю щодо свого чоловіка, чи ні. І також прокоментуйте, чи вам сподобалось це відео.